So again, on the window of your toolbar, if you click or hide, if you accidentally close it, you can always go back and view and show the toolbar. So it'll give you that section. You can always just go to Window, Arrange, Workspace, and just reset the essential. I just like to close up this library here. So as you go through this part, here's the Magic Erase tool. When I click on this, it takes a little more of the white pixels that I would like, so I just want to reduce the amount in the tolerance. So I'm just going to put it at 10 and see what happens. So when I click that, it doesn't take some of these pieces that are next to each other, which is contiguous. If I take contiguous off, click on white, then you'll notice all of the white pixels that are listed under that tolerance level of 10 disappear. So that's the difference between having that checked and not checked. So I'm just going to click on it, take the Move tool, and just show you two things. When I click and drag and drop it, it puts it on there. If I click and drag and hold the Shift key before I release the mouse, it'll put it right in the center of the image there. So see if you can't do that. I'm not going to save the window, but I have this part onto here, and that'll get you set up. And I can do the arrange and just so consolidate all those tabs. So see if you can do back on the page, just the stacking order of the layers. You guys can have seen that where they're on top of one another. If you drag and drop, all these are on separate layers if you don't have them visible. Just click on them to make them visible and just make sure that the clock is up at the top. Double click and name this. Like I said, it's helpful in the naming of it. You can also, as you get into this, as you right click and you can change the colors if that helps when the layers get pretty numerous there. It makes it a little bit easier to work from. But to take a look at the opacity of the fill and the opacity, and you also have the layer styles here as well, or layer modes. So adjusting this, you can either use the option 10, 20%. You can just use the slider bar, type a number in as it goes through that. And then if you haven't experienced with the layer mode too much, just you click on this, you have all of these options that cover just about every tool as well. They all have a similar function for each brush, but everyone has a slightly different aspect to it. But when you take a look at them, see if you can't change the order of the sections, experiment with some of these effects at least to take a look at them, and just kind of change when you're done. Just make sure that the opacity is at 50. I'll leave it at normal just so that you can see it for that section. And that'll give you that part. But at least you can see it. So I'm just going to leave this at 90% just to start off with this one. Just checking it out. See what it does. For the screen, the mode, just put, let's see if we have it here. I'm just going to click on the screen mode at 90%. Based on the image that you see here, they have the clock down in the lower right corner, then they're going to link these layers to then start to move them. So depending on which layer you have selected with the selection tool, allows you to move them. Then you have to take a look at the auto select. When that's highlighted, whatever the mouse clicks on, it'll jump to that layer. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier to grab things or locate where they're at. And the only trouble is if you're working on a file, you want to make sure sometimes that's turned off, otherwise you're moving your entire image. But for this file, I'm just kind of placing this clock kind of below, almost at the 9 and the 3 there at the bottom, still letting it stay on the page this way. You have the arrow keys again that you can move. You guys remember that, I'm sure. And I'm just going to take these two layers and link them together so that they move at the same time, even though they're separated from one another. As long as both of these are highlighted using the control or the command key, these two are highlighted, and you can right click to link the layers. If you don't have the right-click button, you can click on this part to link them right to here. And you can also hold down the control key with just the normal click to click on that. So it gives you a few ways to do it. There's even a section up here at the top there that allow you to change that. And when you see it, you'll see the little chain link, 3 little links there. So that's kind of placed in there. And then the free transform. If you don't have the show transform controls, then you can go to Edit, Free Transform, Command T, you might remember, depending on which way you like to work with the best. And then just rotating this section. So as I click and rotate it, you can kind of see that the bearing is clipped off. It depends on sometimes the images that you bring into Photoshop, how close or far apart they are. So that's going to be that part that you can rotate, depending on where your icon and your mouse are located. And then just positioning it off to the side here. So you can kind of see that this is sectioned off here. And it gives you that piece. And then accepting or not accepting it, hitting the return key, that type of thing, to place it onto that section. Okay, the gradient you've used a little bit before, but just to show you the section, it's going to be above this background layer, so highlight that layer and create a new layer either by the icon, right-clicking on it, or layer, new layer up at the top. And it'll give you the piece at the top. I'm just going to give it a title with gradient. On the top there. Return. Okay. And the gradient tool you've seen before, when you highlight it, click on it, it brings up the editor so that you can see these pieces. And this one is just going to be the section going from foreground to transparent. You have foreground to background, second one over, and then all these presets that you might remember from a couple before. And they have this purple haze over there, so just by clicking on the color modification, you can change through this and grab it from there. You can also just click on the color to get the color picker if you remember, and also just grab the swatches and grab the purple from there. So a number of ways to edit that color, locating it from that section. Okay. And also it has color libraries that you can choose from. And then all you're doing is taking it from a gradient right to left, but remember all the different functions that are up at the options part. And just clicking, dragging across. If you hold the shift key down, if you remember from before, it keeps it highlighted there. This is on the bottom layer, but it does affect the clock, at least because of the percentage. And just change this layer to 60, about 60%. Give you that haze there. So as you take the text tool, I'm just resetting the foreground background color to the default down at the bottom. Clicking on it, if you remember from all the type that's up there, you have everything that's highlighted at the top. You also have the character palette pop in and over from the side if you want to separate it, but it has both highlighted in there. And just to get us started, I'm just going to put your initials down in the year, and you can kind of get an idea of what's happening right away. But just to make this a bold font, you guys have all the access to fonts, but Arial Black is a pretty good scaled font. In the points for this, if you remember, you can highlight it, change the arrow, you can actually scroll over the icon back and forth to make it larger. And that scrolling works in Photoshop and not in Illustrator, but it also has the tracking, which is the space between the letters. The leading, there's only one line of text, so it's not going to hurt it. But it has the vertical and horizontal scaling you remember from before. All these extra pieces down here with the T are just a kind of the faux script. It gives you the section for the font, even though it doesn't exist within the native font itself. It kind of fakes it for a little bit. So, but you just got to be careful when you print that section out. So just trying to make this a little bit larger. Once you have it, oops, make sure you have it in there. See if this will make it any bigger. So That'll give you the point size right there. So again, just taking it. And just go ahead and check it off there and place it right in that section. Now as you get this, make sure that the gauge is in there so that you can kind of see the relationship as far as it's composed. Editing the text you may recall already, so you don't have to take too much, but if it's highlighting one line, the entire line, that's all. In Photoshop and Illustrator is slightly different, bringing those together. And this section, at least for the text itself, has a couple layer styles in there at least. And as you go through that, within here you can modify everything, even though the native color is constant there. But just kind of showing this to you. It has the texture, it has a stroke and an outer glow to this. So when you take a look at this piece, the texture is also listed in the bevel and emboss, but it also has a couple ways to get at it so that you can do that. And it also has the gradient, but in a pattern overlay, it lets you scale this part. And when you get into the texture from here, it also has the scaling for the texture as well. So depending on both directions, it'll give you that piece. And you can still zoom in and zoom out. Use the space bar to move while you have this layer styles open, if you recall. And it gives you that section. So it has the screen, the glow, and the outer glow. So try to give it a texture, a stroke, and an outer glow onto your image there that you can take. Keep in mind when you open up the textures, you can click on the resetting of the patterns, but anything that you've created will be deleted. So usually it's a good idea to actually append it. So if you pick on something that comes up here, rather than replace everything, hit append so you don't lose any of the textures that you might have made. The same idea with the color overlay, does the same part, brings you up the color picker for this. In this case, they just had a bright yellow. But as they go through some of these pieces, you'll see that it has a purple and yellow, so they're trying to give you the complementary color scheme for this one. Keep in mind this one has a lot of settings in here, so when I hit Option I can reset them, so at least it goes back to that beginning part if I've gone too far, and just give myself that section, so keeping it into this part. So here's the stroke. Keep in mind with the stroke, right now I'm just setting it to a color. It has all the color bars, all the color choices for it. It also has the, you can make it a gradient or a pattern for that stroke. So when you click on the gradients, you can see that you can bring that up. But usually it's just a section from there. So if you just keep it a color, you can highlight that. Gives you the point size. And keep in mind, this file is low resolution, 72, so just keeping that section. And the glowing and everything does the same section. You can highlight that section for that as well, giving it a gradient on the outside of it. That'll get you highlighted, depending on which one you choose from. You have two options right here. Change a little bit of the opacity, the size of it. And then the pattern overlay or the texture is what's going to get you the section. Right now you can't see this one because it's set to multiply, keeping it at normal, and the scaling of it and the opacity of it. So see if you can't change that section, and then you'll have that piece